I would like to paint an imaginary based on these color plays that I've painted. These are very quick, very simple, and they'll give you an idea of color combinations that you might not have painted before or thought of. And also, it's a great way to just learn watercolor from the timing of it, which has everything to do with how watercolor works besides gravity, making it move, tilting the page. I picked a color combination that I liked, and I'm going to paint what I call an imaginary. And I'm a landscape painter usually, and I'm going to just keep to my guide of painting, keep it simple. The top two-thirds is going to be wet and wet, and the bottom third is going to be wet on dry or dry on dry. And I'm just using this color play that I did as my palette. So let's give it a shot. Again, I'm just painting the top two-thirds wet and wet. I'm going to stop and leave a space at the bottom for my wet on dry. And now I'm going to just add more color based on my color play palette and let watercolor paint itself. As I'm letting the watercolor paint itself, I'm patient enough to let it do its thing. I'm not going to try to fix stuff. I'm not going to try to control the watercolor. I want to take advantage of what it's going to give me. From my experience, it makes me a better artist. It makes me look better because I'm only painting half a painting, if you will. Uh, and I'm letting watercolor paint the rest of it. That's why I chose that as my medium. Here I'm just putting a base coat in on the bottom third. I'm going to let that dry so I can paint wet on dry. And I've kept a distance, a gap between there. That's still the paper, and I've touched it in a couple of places just to just to see what happens. What I'm trying to do is not think. I'm just trying to let my imagination loose, if you will. And I'm just watching. The page is going to tell me what to do next. I feel free to pick up this paper that I'm painting on, this pad, whatever size it is, and make the watercolor move the way I want it to. Uh, this way, I can control it a little bit by using gravity. And for this sky, I want it to uh, gradate or paint itself in stripes from top to bottom, representing more of a sky. So that means I have to turn it sideways and let the paint run off the page horizontally. I can get that started also by just using an atomizer, not necessarily a spray bottle for this size, because it's too heavy drops of water. The atomizer seems to work pretty well. Here I've dried off the bottom part a little bit, and while the top, that wet on wet 2/3, is still a little bit damp, I'm just going to wing it. I'm just going to start putting in some darker tones and some shapes that are a suggestion of, in this case, could be a tree line. Anyway, I'm not painting specifically. I'm suggesting that it might be a tree line. Uh, that gives me the freedom to design. Basically, what this is the bottom third lets me paint these dry on dry strokes and lets me design these shapes and values, and I'm still traditionally going to work from light to dark and top to bottom, but this gives me the freedom to be creative, and I'm not going to think, I'm just going to paint. I'm going to let the page tell me what to do. Darker, lighter, more, less, etc. Here I've started to paint with my palette knife. It makes interesting textures, especially if you let the color underneath dry a little bit. You can scrape back to that color. It also gives me a better, or at least another option to my texture besides brush. So it gives a different little look to it. You can use any tools that you have available. I like drawing or painting with a stick because it gives me a surprise. I don't know when it's going to run out of paint. And now I'm starting to add some darks. Uh, I love to start adding darks because that's going to define the painting, and that gives it its power, its interest for me. It gives that value change, dark, light, mid-tone. So this is a decision for me coming up, and I'm going to use my transparent watercolor, more like gouache. I was trained in gouache, and I have no illusions or misgivings about using gouache. You can make any of your transparent watercolors if you add white to them, white gouache. You'll make them opaque watercolor. Here I'm adding, I'm going with my gut. I just felt that I needed to pick up some blue. I can imagine that's a pond on this imaginary, maybe it's a farm, but it balances the blue sky on the left-hand side. I'm balancing that with some interest coming off of that lighter color. Maybe that's a sunrise, sunset. This is what I like about painting from imagination. And one of my guides, my big guide for my art to know if you're done or not, is one of my guides is to let the viewer finish the painting. Have I left enough space, detail, etc., for the viewer to put those things in? I'm just trying to suggest it. I'd love for the viewer to be able to look at this painting several times and find something new in it every time, and that's my goal. This is one of my favorite parts, taking the tape off, get rid of the mess so I can kind of do a reveal. Now I can look at it. Now I can make adjustments, etc., etc., do the little things or just leave it alone. I'm done. I was just comparing that to my color play, which really didn't represent anything. It was a bunch of just colors in a rectangle that I picked, I chose to use for my palette to make this painting. It's similar to it. I'm not bound to do that, but it's a great starting point. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this quick little demo. This did not take long to paint. Most of it's real time, 15-20 minutes. And talking about it took a little bit of that time, but they are fun to do. You will learn a tremendous amount about the timing of watercolor, what stays luminous, how watercolor dries back lighter than what you put on when you first put on wet and wet. And thanks for watching.